Monday morning at the abortion clinic. They were 5 tired girls, and they huddled outside the back door of the clinic. Some sat on the steps, and some hunched against the siding, and they shivered in the darkness and whispered, "How far did you come? And you had 3 bus changes? I had 5. Or sang, "I think I like Iowa." They were young mostly, and scared of what might happen, but too determined to let it show. Another group, who had missed the message about going to the back door, waited at the front, wary of the protesters who had not yet arrived. In size and shape, they were no different from those at the back door, some being large and big-boned girls, and others tiny, and some brown because they were Indian or something else, or had simply worked beside farmhands their whole lives, and others so pale their faces were luminous in the dark. Many had traveled through the night, and the day before, too. They came from rolling hills dotted with oil derricks and trailers, or towns with golf scrambles and church suppers, or farms where the winds roared over the plains and the tallest point on the horizon was a telephone pole leading out of the driveway. The receptionist lived in town and arrived before the demonstrators. She was plump in a matronly way and had a brisk manner about her. She unlocked the back door and then the front. "Quick, inside you girls, but you'll have to wait. The nurses and doctors don't arrive before 10. No food or eating from now on till you finish, and no cell phones." A woman familiar with the waiting rooms of clinics settled in by the window in the opposite corner. She knew if you wanted to sit alone, a corner seat with no legroom for anyone else was your best bet. It had a direct view of the receptionist, and a view to the outside, too, where the protesters had begun to arrive. She watched them as they organized themselves. There was something strange how their righteous sense of mission could not rescue their pasty faces and lumpy paunch. She leaned down and rummaged in her handbag as she had been doing since she arrived. When she touched the soft bulge of her wallet, she relaxed. There was no one in the waiting room she had anything in common with, so she studied the posters on the walls. They were of islands with names like Aruba and Anguilla and Bonaire. She was sure no one on those islands had heard the sound of a thrasher. Dust and drought probably never visited them either. She pulled her bag to her heart, put her arms around it, and closed her eyes. She woke when she felt her chair move. Through half-opened eyes, she stared at a pair of hands holding a grass-stained backpack. She shut her eyes again and said to herself, "If I say nothing, maybe she'll look for someplace else to sit." All around the waiting room, girls fidgeted in the plastic seats that would not give no matter how wide their hips. Outside, the wind blew the robes of arriving nuns and whipped them into black clouds that were stark against the cityscape. The girl sitting next to the woman leaned over to someone else a few seats over. "Should I have a general or a local?" she asked. "Do you know which is safer, but will it hurt? And how do you know if it works? What if it doesn't? How long will it take? Is this the first time for you?" The questions poured out of her one after the other, as if in the asking she could stop the flood of memories of everything she had left behind for now. The farm that was no longer a farm, and the cattle that no longer grazed, and the kitchen that stood stark and empty without her mother. "But that's behind me," she said to herself. The woman was surprised to hear such resolve in the girl's voice, and startled, too, because that was how she felt. This day would be behind her as well, this baby that was not a baby. A reckless mistake was what it was. She opened her eyes and stared. The girl leaned towards her with eagerness in her eyes, and the woman felt her need to confide. All the woman had to do was blink or raise her eyebrows. It could be the smallest gesture, and the girl would tell her everything she was thinking about, everything she was worrying about, and everything she was hoping for. It was overwhelming. The woman did not want to hold the problems of someone she did not know. She had enough of her own, and she was not going to let someone she would never see again usurp her private hours at the clinic. It was a relief when the girl finally quieted. The woman let her mind go blank, but something about the girl found its way into her imagination. She had not really studied the girl before, and she saw that she was tall and wiry with a small head that surprised her in its delicateness. It was a soft face with puffy lips and a snub nose, and she had pale blonde hair that was tucked behind her ears. She wore no jewelry and no makeup. The woman thought, She seemed the kind of person who did not spend time before a mirror, and so she did not know she was lovely because she was still a sketch of a girl waiting to be colored by the years that would turn her into a woman. She glanced at the girl's hands. They were large hands, as large as a grown man's. They had scattered nicks and scars, which made the woman think they had been working hands once. They were capable hands, hands able to save a man's life, and the woman considered herself a pretty good judge of things like that. Whatever calluses the girl once had, they were gone, and she wore fresh blue polish on nails that were bitten below the quick. The woman could see that the girl had lived one life and now was shedding it for another. "I don't know why she's being so snotty," the girl said to herself behind her half-grown face. "It's not like we're not in the same boat, knocked up and a little desperate. So why does she have to be snotty to me? What did I do except sit next to her? She's boring, that's what she is, with that wool blazer and white button blouse. And what's with that long skirt? Oh, God, maybe she's a Mormon, except they probably keep their babies." No, the girl pegged her as people from the rural Plains states do, Bethany Lutheran or United Methodist. And still a snot, the girl thought. She stood up, shook herself loose, and sat back down again. Her breasts ached. Since getting pregnant, they had swollen, and she felt her whole body grow like an autumn glow peach ready to drop. There was nothing to see or feel down there, not that she hadn't checked, but her body knew anyway that something was alive and growing. The idea was thrilling and horrifying. It was too much to think about. She thought instead of her room back home with its pebbly bedspread, and of her stuffed bear that sat on the pillow, and the splotches on his fur that marked the accidents of her childhood. Her heart roared in her ears. It roared all the time now. She wondered if the woman's did too. The whole thing was exhausting and left her breathless. Teachers stopped her in the hallway to ask if she was all right, and sometimes their kindness made her want to cry, but she shook her head and shouldered past them to the next class. It was none of their business. This thing living inside of her was simply more of her bad luck. Or maybe it was part of growing up. The waiting room was full of girls who looked like her. She was nothing special at all. The woman gazed around the room at the girls. Only a few seemed older, in their early 20s or so. The rest looked young enough to be from another landscape. She was an anomaly, though she did not consider herself old. 41 for God's sakes, and as fertile as the girl next to her. It was almost laughable. Sex had all but disappeared when her husband turned his back on the farm and went into trucking, and so it seemed natural to put away the birth control pills. But one freak afternoon, her husband made an unexpected stop at the house not on his calendar. It was one of those warm September days, still ripe with summer, and she was alone in the house, rinsing the string beans she had picked. He did not say why he had stopped, and she did not ask, though later she would wonder. He stood behind her and curled his hands around hers, and she no longer heard the hum of someone else's harvester in the field behind the house. She heard only the water as it splashed over their palms. She saw only the beans that glistened blue and green inside their fingers. She breathed in the sweet and sour sweat and remembered him as he had been before. Together, they walked up the stairs, and when they reached the bedroom, he lifted her on top of the sagging bed. When it was over, she was on his side, and he was on hers. He left before the school bus turned up the drive. He had stayed less than an hour, but to her, it felt like a year of Sunday afternoons. Afterwards, the bed felt hollow and cold. Then some days passed, and the bed became familiar again. It did not occur to her that she was pregnant, but when her period did not arrive, she remembered.